there, and welcome back to Stay Sharp in Digital Engineering with Razorleaf. We're really glad you're here. In this episode, Jonathan Scott and I sit down with Derek Neiding to unravel some of the complexities around implementing digital engineering systems like PLM and MES. This topic was suggested by our internal team, so we thought we'd take some time to dig into some of the process analysis that goes into planning digital engineering systems, how to build a solid business case, and securing executive buy-in when you're setting up your project. So we're going to clarify some of the differences between a proof of concept, pilot, and quick start, which are very much terms used today when you're working with consultants or internally. And then we also talk about the real world value of, or the limitations of working with consultants. And so we try to take our own hats on and off on that conversation, knowing some of the complexities that are involved. But anyway, we hope you like it, and let's jump in. Welcome back, everyone, to Stay Sharp in Digital Engineering, the podcast about all things digital related to products from manufacturing, engineering to manufacturing, service, and beyond. I'm one of your hosts, Julianne Grant, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Jonathan Scott.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Jonathan. We're back in the hot seat today.
Loving it.
Loving it. All right. So today we're having an interesting conversation, and we have a special guest with us, Derek Neiding, who is the Vice President of our Business Development at Razorleaf. Welcome, Derek.
Hello. Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Always good to have you here. So this topic came up from an internal group that thought we should be talking a little bit about the ways to get folks started on a digital engineering system like PLM and MES. So that's an area where our business, we help a lot of folks help sort out what they need to be thinking about when it comes to getting started in digital engineering. So we invited Derek in because he has a lot of these conversations, and we thought it'd be helpful for him to share some of his perspective as well, of course, Jonathan, about what they see. So let me just a little bit about Derek in case I'm not sure I've actually read an official bio by you, Derek, here. So we are going to do that today.
All right.
So Derek is the Vice President of Business Development at Razorleaf, and he leads the sales strategy and partner relationships. So Derek was Razorleaf's first employee, and he has held roles spanning consulting, integrations, and customer engagement, and gives him he has deep expertise in PLM and digital thread solutions. So with a career foundation at Invacare in CAD and product data management, Derek is very passionate about helping manufacturers connect systems and accelerate innovation. So there, official.
Thank you.
You're official.
Great.
You're official now, Derek.
You are.
Good.
No, super glad to have you here because I want to jump into this. I think between the two of us, we've seen a lot in this space, right? And obviously, Razorleaf does a lot of projects for enterprise software and software systems, and we see all kinds of different approaches people take to getting started. And it doesn't seem like there's any one right way to get started with a project to deploy a PDM or PLM or MES or any other business system or digital engineering solution. But I think we've seen a number of ways, and we can talk through some of those more popular ways and really throw some pros and cons out there of the things that we've seen. And I think, Derek, on the business development side, you see even more than I see at the ones that don't get started a particular way, right? Or a customer says, look, that's not an approach that I want to take. So anyway, I'm hoping between what we have to talk about today and what our audience chimes in with in comments and things after the fact, we get a lot out on this topic. So I'm going to jump in and say, let's start with the default. No judgment that any of these are good or bad, or, we'll see what comes out of it. But the default is, okay, just start using some software, right? Either install it, just put in your credit card for the cloud, whatever, but just go. What does that look like, and pros, cons there? What do you think?
Yep. So it's certainly, I can see why that's appealing. If it's on-prem, you've installed the software. If it's a cloud system, you've got your accounts all set up, and that seems like a milestone. So we've done that. Now let's start using it. There's the temptation to try to show results quickly. So if we can get into it and start doing something with it, then we can show results. People are going to be happy about that. So there's definitely appeal to doing it that way. But what we see happens frequently is that there's no vision. There's no kind of defined process to get us through the early phases down to the later phases. And we find that without a vision and a discussion, oftentimes the system starts to mirror current processes, which in some cases is good, but in some cases the system has different and better ways to do things, but you're just mirroring your current processes. So maybe you're not taking advantage of everything that the system could come to offer. And doing that, you may start to feel like you're kind of misaligned with the system. So you say, well, it doesn't do this. Well, maybe it doesn't do that for a reason, but because you haven't really kind of taken the time to say, are our processes the best processes? Maybe that happens. So you end up with this, what we tend to see is that when you just jump in, you end up with this, the software isn't right for us. It doesn't fit. It doesn't do what we thought it would. Maybe there's a restart that happens because of all of that. And you realize that, well, maybe we're not quite right. And so you do a restart and users don't like that misalignment. And, we adopted it once and now we got to adopt it again in a different way. And so it's not that getting into the software early is necessarily a bad thing. But I think there are some things that need to happen before you dive too deep into it to try to make sure that when you get into that software early, that you have a bit of a plan and a bit of a focus on what you're trying to do.
Yeah, this one to me, it does feel a little bit like ready, fire, aim sort of thing, right? Where it's if you go too fast, you may sort of miss the path you needed to be on, right? Because you didn't even think about the path. You were just like, let's go. Here's an answer, let's go. And you could end up sideways. I think I know I've seen that a handful of times where you're right, you could build some momentum, right? Because people get excited and there's a lot of excitement around it, but you can also make a lot of steps in the wrong direction, have to back up and start over, and that can lead to its own set of challenges. So, yeah.
Well, and you think about it, a lot of these software, whether it's a large PLM system or an MES system, they're solving multiple business problems. Mm-hmm. And everybody has kind of what they hope to get out of it. And so if I hope to get, this feature out of it and we get started, and that's kind of where my focus is, but someone else was hoping to get something else out of it, and they see the progress I'm making, they're like, well, this doesn't do anything for me though.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We'll get there, but they don't realize that because there's been kind of no alignment on how this goes from phase 1 to phase 2 and so on.
So that's another con, I think, right? Is you could miss alignment, you could miss some communication, those things. Yeah, go ahead, Julianne. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to ask. So in our experience, for people who actually, take the time to kind of get that alignment, what percentage of time do processes get changed? Are they, is it 100%? My thought is those who do it right,
Usually.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say most of the time, right? I mean, if you just take a minute to ask one other opinion, you're probably going to end up somewhere between the two. Oh, I was going to do this, but this other person told me they need to do that. You probably come up somewhere in the middle. Ask a third person, guess what? Changes just a little bit based on what they had to say, at least if it's a collaborative organization.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, our processes that we have in place today are probably formed by some hurdle or obstacle that we had in the past. And that kind of formed our process, and we made some changes, and now we account for that in our process. And maybe that hurdle or obstacle is different or non-existent with the new system, but meanwhile, we're still using the same process. So it's not that processes have to be completely re-engineered, but you certainly should take a step back. I've always often said that if your processes are lousy, when you put a PLM system in that helps to automate processes, it just helps you get lousy processes done faster. And that's usually not the goal of a PLM system. We want the process to get better. We want it to be faster, and we want it to be better. So you do have to kind of step back and look at everything and say, what do we, in the ideal world, what would this look like?
So, okay, I think we're digging into this one a little bit with your question there, Julianne, about, so what if you did process analysis first, right? If you did that sort of, let me analyze what I need before you begin. I mean, is that a good way to start? Or what's some other pluses and minuses there, Derek, that you see?
I think analyzing up front is a good way to start. You have to be careful to not get into what we call analysis paralysis, that you just spend too much time analyzing. There's kind of the 80-20 rule. How far can we get? The phrase that we've heard some of our customers use and that we use is, don't let perfection be the enemy of good. So sometimes you can get things far enough along that they're good. And keep in mind that the implementation of these kind of systems is a progressive thing. There was a time back in the 80s and 90s where you did lots of work up front and you flipped a switch and your whole business changed overnight and hopefully everything was right. That's not how we do it anymore. It's a progressive thing. And so we go after this feature of the PLM system, and we realize that it's not quite perfect, but it's better than we were. And we're going to learn some stuff along the way. And the next phase will be even better than that. So I think looking at the process is good. I think you probably want to kind of time box yourself when you do that. And you want to say that we're gonna look into our processes. We're gonna talk about ways we can do them. We're gonna solicit opinions from other departments and other people, but we're only gonna do it for this long. And whatever we get to after this point, whether it's time boxing it or you just create some milestones that you want to make sure you accomplish, once you get there, it's time to move on to the next step. We go to the next step, and then we're willing to come back, kind of that agile approach of let's get something out, let's learn from what we got out, and then let's make educated refinements as we go forward.
So I like that one, right? The start and adjust method. That makes a lot of sense, because going back to how we got there about, hey, you could stop and analyze your processes, right? If I put it in that ready, fire, aim analogy and say, well, no, that one's more about ready, aim. Be careful that you're not aiming so long that the target has moved, right? And the business has maybe moved on from the problem you were trying to solve or overcome by events or whatever. So that one that you brought up, another approach here of, a little bit of analysis, but then get going. And then maybe the analysis comes with each step. Is that kind of what you're talking about there with the start and adjust?
There are probably some major things in your analysis that you'll find that you'll be really happy that you found those major things. You might not have to dig too deep into them, but at least get them on the radar and know that they're out there. So here's an analogy that I use sometimes, which is if I'm a growing manufacturing company and I've outgrown my facility and it's time to build a new facility, I need to buy some land and build a new facility, it probably is worthwhile for me to back up and say, what's my 10-year plan? I know what next year's plan is. Next year's plan is the 100,000 square foot facility doesn't fit and we need to build something bigger. We need to get up to 200,000. But what I don't want to do is go out and buy enough land to build 200,000, only to find out in 5 years that I wanted to get to 4 or 5 and 1 million square feet, and I don't have enough land. So could I buy enough land to get me to 1 million square feet, but only build the 200,000 today?
Right.
Knowing
not get the
future.
Not get the full architectural plans for the 1 million square foot building, right?
I just need to know that it's coming, right?
Yep.
So when I'm looking at my processes, there are certain things that we'll look at and we'll say, in the future, our product is going to be much more of a product as a service. And so we're going to need sensors and that sort of thing. We're not there yet, but we know that. So let's make sure that we choose a PLM system that has connections to IoT sort of things. Okay. Do we need to implement that yet? We don't need to implement it yet. We just need to know that it's there when the time comes.
So I'm going to put a word on that and see if this matches what you're talking about. It's something we've done a number of times, and that's a roadmap, right? It's not a detailed plan, not a detailed architecture, not it's all figured out, but this is where I think I'm going, and let me back up enough to know, well, here are the couple of exits on the highway that I need to watch out for. I need to be careful of. I need to make sure I'm taking that one, that kind of thing. Is that what you're talking about?
That's exactly right. And then when you get closer to that exit, you start to zero in, right? You're like, once I get off, then it's this right turn, then McDonald's is on this side of the road, and I go over here. You really start to look at the detail. And that's what we're talking about. Build the roadmap, know you probably want to know your 1 year, your 2 year, your 5 year plan, get those kind of things laid out at a high level, and then really dig into year one. What specifically do we need to do? And then we're ready once we kind of know the specifics of the early phases.
So is this a point in time when people start looking and comparing systems, and when they kind of have their list of needs and sort of their current needs and future needs, and then they start, at what point does the software bake-off happen, for example?
There's a good one.
Yeah.
Right. And back to our sort of the point of the whole thing, should you start with that, or when does that happen? Maybe it's kind of what you're asking, Julianne.
Even more specifically, right? Is it, because it seems like you need to focus around solving a problem. You're not just buying software because it's cool. So
yeah.
But I think some people do. I think some people start with that. And Derek, correct me where I'm wrong, right? I mean, so I'm going to jump in with my con on this one. If you're thinking of starting by doing a bake-off, I think you are missing something, right? Because you asked about it in the context of, well, when does this fit in the roadmap? But there are folks who will say, step one is figure out what software you're going to use and then move on from there. And to me, that sort of says, well, how did you compare? What was your criteria? I don't know, Derek. So, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, so I have lots of thoughts on this one.
Okay.
I have all kinds of analogies I want to throw out as well. So stop me.
Please do. We love those.
If I get too deep into that. But so the software bake-off has its place. I think at some point it makes sense to look at the competing softwares and see which one is best. But what does best mean? Well, best means aligned with where I'm going. I'm going to say something that might be controversial. All these PLM systems, let's use PLM, MES would be similar. They're all the same. They
don't want to hear that.
They all do the same sort of thing. Different vendors have a different focus, and they say that, we're all about the CAD integration. And so if that's really important to you, this is kind of the place, or we're all about the integration with the manufacturing shop floor and that. And so they have different focuses, but a lot of the basics are very much the same. In the bio, Julianne mentioned that I used to be on the consulting side of the organization, and I used to do software demos for some of this PDM and PLM software. And I demoed some software that wasn't the greatest stuff. And I made it look really, really good. So if it's just a bake-off, you run the risk of kind of being wowed by a great demo or a software that has the most advanced user interface. And maybe then that doesn't line up. So here's my analogy. If someone says to me, what's better, Derek? Is a full-size Ford pickup or a 53-foot Peterbilt semi better? What are you trying to do? If your goal is to go to the grocery store and get groceries, good luck parking that semi, right?
Right.
But if your goal is to move a 2,000 square foot house across the country, good luck doing that with a pickup truck. So I need to know what I'm trying to accomplish. And then, frankly, once I know that, a lot of times the decision of what software to use wouldn't say it's automatic, but it's much easier. So if I can go into this technical bake-off with, I've looked at my 5-year roadmap, I kind of know what's important early, I know what's going to be important in the future. Now let's evaluate the software in that light. And then we'll see. And you may look at some software and you're like, that's a pickup truck, I'm moving across country, that doesn't even qualify. Maybe they don't even get invited to the bake-off.
Yeah. I think there's another piece of that that's important too, Derek, which is the most important element, or what are the important elements? Not that there's one that's most important to getting the grocery trip done or getting the move across the country done. And people miss that sometimes, and they are thinking about the software is the thing, right? And I don't want to argue with the fact that, yeah, you're making a big purchase a lot of times, and even not just the purchase, but you're going to put your data in something, and there's a cost to switching. So switching cost is high, so you want to get it right. However, I think the thing that people will miss a lot of times is that you could take not so great PLM system A, and you can do a lot of process work and training work around it, and you can really fit it to a company's needs and get everybody behind it and optimize it, and it can be amazing for results. And you can take PLM system B that is the best, most optimal, greatest fit, whatever, and you can end up with all the resistance in the world. You cannot document it, not train people, and it's a disaster, right? And it's like, you have to remember there's more to it than either buying truck A or truck B.
There are companies that have improved their productivity, made better products faster with PLM System A and PLM System B in the same industry.
Right.
So it's not the PLM system. It's not that there's some vendor out there that has magically figured out what no one else can seem to figure out. Again, they all have their different focuses, their different approaches. They tend to focus more on this feature or that feature. And so I think you're right. And I think when you're trying to evaluate that, we've got our 5-year roadmap, our multi-year roadmap, whatever it is. There are some things on there that are must-haves. And there are some things on there that are, I'm curious how you do it. It's not going to change my decision. And you need to understand that I've been involved in these bake-offs on the vendor side, and I've gotten the bake-off scripts, and I've sometimes looked at particular things, and I'm like, they're really going to pick a PLM system based on this thing.
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't make any, can you add arrowheads to the redlining in the viewer?
Right.
That's what you're going to pick, right? So, I'm not saying that you don't want to see that sort of stuff, but make sure that we categorize it. We say, look, here are whether you share that with a vendor or not, but internally, we know that these are the must-haves, these are the critical things. We want to look at some other stuff and see that, because that may be part of our longer-term roadmap. And then that facilitates a much better decision process.
So I want to throw another possibility related to getting started out there. And it's a couple of them. And I think it would be useful if, Derek, if you could kind of differentiate them. How are these different? Because they may sound the same to everybody. And that's getting started with a pilot or a proof of concept or a quick start. Are they all the same thing? I don't think they are, but what's your take?
Yeah, they're not. I would say a proof of concept. The goal of a proof of concept is to test feasibility. It's does this software check the boxes that we needed to check? Are we confident that it technically meets our needs? So we're kind of confirming capabilities and fit. That's how I would define a proof of concept.
So I hear that like I hear hands-on test drive, right? Because I've heard that question plenty of times before. Can I have a hands-on test drive for software X? But that's what I hear you saying. POC is that. Of course, probably a little more involved than just sitting down in front of the keyboard. But okay.
Yeah. A pilot, I think we're starting now to apply real-world use cases and workflows and real users to the system to really try to get more validation. So it's probably not, do I do a proof of concept or a pilot? Maybe I'll start with a proof of concept. Maybe you even narrow it down to one or a couple leading contenders. And then we go into a pilot with one or a couple where we actually we've seen customers that do pilots with a production project. They take a project that's currently running and they run it through the pilot because they want to see real world what's really happening with it.
Right. How would this have gone if we had used System X or Process X or whatever?
Yeah. Right. So that's how I would define pilot and proof of concept. Quick start is completely different, I believe. Quick start is a implementation approach. It is, we've selected this vendor, this software. We know what we want to do with it, assuming that you've built that roadmap that we talked about, and we're going to get started. We're going to get started in the quickest, most efficient way possible, trying to, capture value quickly, not the months worth of configuration to go live. We're going to assume with a quick start that the vendor, which this is the case with almost all the vendors today, have some out-of-the-box functionality that does not require a lot of customization and configuration up front, maybe some minor stuff, talking about days or weeks worth of configuration, and we're going to get started quickly. The interesting thing, and again, that a quick start is not instead of a proof of concept or a pilot, just like a pilot's not instead of a proof of concept. They all have kind of different approaches. So you may do a proof of concept, you may do a pilot, you may select and then get started with a quick start.
Right. Yeah, you could put several of these together in a certain order and not use some of them and use others and that kind of thing. One of the things on the quick start front, I'll throw in there, from my experience, and I want to get your take on this too, is I think there's an activity you need to do in parallel if you didn't do it up front, right? So if you did a roadmap and you know where you're going, great. If you didn't, and you take the approach of start and adjust, quick start style, that, okay, you've got to do something in parallel to make sure that your quick start, then the next step goes where you need it to go. So, is that how you see that, or is there an order to that you have to do?
No, I think you're right. I think you have to understand that roadmap, and then you assign a portion of that roadmap to the quick start. And that's what we're trying to accomplish as our early phases. And then from that, one of the values of the quick start is that you're learning not theory and concept, you're learning really how it does it. Think about it. How in your career as a mechanical engineer or a director of engineering or a IT person, how many PLM systems are you going to implement? We talk to people that move from company to company, and they may have been involved in the implementation of 2, 3, somewhere around in that area. Someone that's been at a company for a long time may in their life only implement or help implement one PLM system. So to sit there and say, I'm going to build a long-term roadmap with my vast knowledge of implementing PLM systems might be not the greatest idea, right? So a quick start allows me to kind of get in there and see what works, what doesn't work, and then make some intelligent decisions going forward. We've had customers that have, for example, asked us for a particular customization. Hey, this is the way our process works. I need you to do this customization. And maybe it's a significant customization, going to take weeks or lots of money to do that. And we've written it for them and put it in place, and they use it. And after a few months, they come back and they say, man, had I known this did this thing out of the box, I wouldn't have ever asked for that.
Right.
But I didn't know it did it. I just assumed that I was always going to need that report or that dashboard or that sort of thing. It's like, but I can kind of get what I need just doing this thing out of the box. So Quick Start allows me to do that, right? It allows me to get my hands dirty and see what the system does. And we say that this particular process or workflow within our company has to be this way. Then we go to Quick Start and we use it kind of close to out of the box. And we're like, oh, you know what? Maybe it doesn't have to be that way. This actually kind of works for us.
That makes sense.
So I want to throw a rock that could potentially sink this kind of boat. What happens, we hear a lot, executive buy-in, you got to have executive buy-in. To what level of education does this kind of system need that's different than maybe, other systems, other platforms, things like that?
So I'll go back to what I said before is how often are we implementing these systems?
Right.
And it's not frequently. So it shouldn't be a surprise to us that some of the executive stakeholders and executive leadership don't understand a lot about the purpose of the system and what we're trying to accomplish with it. I mean, they have likely read or talked to colleagues and they understand at a high level what we're trying to do. But do they understand more at a tactical level and even a strategic level of what we're trying to accomplish? So I think the education is pretty important. It gets everyone aligned. So engineering has their goals. And again, not to say anything bad about engineering, but engineering's goals may be very tactical in that I need to be able to do workflow, engineering change processes faster because they're such a pain. And so that's all I care about. So we go and we get a PLM system and that's what we do. And engineer says, perfect, my engineering change process is much more efficient. And then there's someone at the executive level that's saying, but we wanted to make smarter products. That was our goal, was to make smarter products. So did you accomplish that? And so if we're not educating each other on not only what the possibilities of these systems are, but also what our goals are and make sure that they align, I think you are missing something, very critical. And we run the risk of not having alignment.
It ties to another one that, I've seen some people do, and it can veer back into that lane of a little too much of the aim before the ready, aim, fire piece. But what about business cases, right? So, okay, let's say people are educated, or maybe hopefully they're going to get educated through this, but what about making a business case, creating some kind of detailed business case? Is that something you need to do up front, something you should do before you start, or how does it fit in your view?
So I would answer that question with a question, which is, if we don't do that, how do we measure success, and how do we measure done, and how do we measure that we've done what we hope to do? Right. So I don't have something in the business case. I mean, ideally, it's a pretty detailed business case, and it's a spreadsheet with numbers and ROI calculations and times and rates and all that sort of stuff, and we can come back and measure that ideally. But maybe it's not that level. Maybe it's just something that is a little more nebulous. But we have to be able to say at some point that this did what we needed to do. And so I think having some level of a business case is definitely important that we do that.
And I like your point there about right level of detail, though, right? Mm-hmm. It could be detailed if you have the information, or it's important somehow to get everybody aligned. But it could be simple. It could be like, we're solving this problem, and you put it in front of people, and it gets back to that communication thing Julianne brought up earlier. Maybe they say, well, no, I'm trying to solve this problem, like right. You said about smart products. And it's that, it's a reason to have the conversation to get aligned. Yep,
that's right. Yeah, and I think that this phase of this project, this kind of education and phase, it can sometimes be looked at, and it depends on personalities. I would say I am the type of personality that is very much ready, fire, aim. I like to just do stuff in my personal life, right? If I have a project, I'll watch a YouTube video or so, and then I'll take the transmission out of the truck and can't be that hard, right? So, I get that, but we sometimes forget that education it's not a delay. It's actually an accelerator. It just kind of moves stuff around, right? So at some point, I need to know what a torque converter does if I'm replacing the transmission, right? I can either choose to know that when all these parts are laying on my garage floor and there's, transmission fluid everywhere, or I could choose to know that in advance. At some point, I'm going to have to know that. And so with the implementation of these enterprise systems, at some point, you're going to have to know, how do these systems connect to other systems? So do we want to know that up front? So maybe we can make some decisions like, don't replace your transmission a couple hours before it's time to go somewhere. We can make some decisions up front.
Right.
Or do we want to wait till we're in a position where we're kind of forced to maybe make some decisions because of the spot we put ourselves in? So we see this a lot. I know when we put proposals out there for some of these kind of analysis projects or even part of an implementation project, a lot of times the education part is the thing that maybe gets cut a little bit. We don't have the budget, we don't have the time. Why are we doing that? It's just, we're paying all this money for training. And it's, and eventually we often find that people kind of regret not having that education because education leads to alignment.
Well, and you have a problem with a self-fulfilling prophecy there sometimes too, I think, right? Which is when you go to the person on our side, when you go to the sponsor that we're talking to say, hey, I think what you need is to step back and get everybody educated. You can suffer from that. Why? I know it, right? It's a lack of understanding where their team is, right? And same thing with alignment. We need to get everybody aligned. Nope, they all get it. Right now, if you go and ask 2 or 3 of their peers what they think the goals of the project are, and they come up with totally different answers, but the person you're talking to is like, no, we're all on the same page. Okay, it's tough.
Well, I used to say that you kind of alluded to this earlier, Jonathan, that we can take PLM system A, which is maybe not the greatest PLM system, and we can make it work with people that have passion, people that are going to work hard at it, and people that are really going to try hard. And we can take PLM system B, which is maybe a more advanced and better system, and it won't work because nobody's behind it.
Right.
I used to say, user acceptance is the number one thing that determines whether or not we're going to succeed. Well, I'm the vice president of the company, and I will fire people if they don't use the PLM system. So that's how we're going to guarantee that it succeeds, until the machinist with 35 years of experience who can make absolutely anything and solve any problem says, I don't want to use the PLM system. And nobody's willing to fire him. Right. So we have to get people behind it, and education is part of that. They have to understand what we're trying to do. They have to understand the goal of it. One of the things that happens with any of these systems is things change. Your process in your life, the day in the life of, changes. And if I don't understand why it changed, because sometimes it doesn't change for the better. This is what we call localized optimization. I look at the engineering change process the way I used to do it, and I did 4 clicks. And the new system comes in, and I now have to do 6. And if I have no understanding of why I now have to do 6, in my mind, this system is no good. And But meanwhile, my 2 additional clicks may have saved weeks down the road.
Right.
So I'm looking at it as localized optimization. My job just got harder instead of, my job did get a little bit harder, but the whole process got easier for a bunch of people. That only comes through education, by people understanding what we're trying to accomplish and how the systems do these sort of things.
So you brought up another good one there. And I bet in a minute, Julianne, you're going to tell me I got to stop asking questions. But This one, I think you brought up process, and that's another piece we haven't really drug too much into the conversation today. Is that a place to start? Should people start with, hey, I want to improve my process, and then think about the software later, or is that not the right fit? What are the pros and cons of starting with process?
The pros are you have to have something to understand to know what you're trying to accomplish. I think that's probably the biggest pro is if I don't, back to my analogy earlier about, a pickup truck versus a semi truck, right?
Right.
Well, what are you trying to do? So we have to have some baseline to start with. So I think that's one of the biggest pros is what are we trying to accomplish? Both short term and long term. I think one of the cons can be the process may change. Maybe it should change, and maybe it needs to change based on the capabilities of the software. So I think having an understanding of the process, but maybe not to the click-by-click level, but more to what the inputs and what the outputs are, That's maybe a little more important than the kind of the click by click, here's how we do these things. No, we need to get engineering change done in 3 days, and we need to make sure we have this kind of audit trail. I don't know what the click by click is, but this is what we need to do. Yeah. That I think is important to have as you go into any sort of evaluation, pilot, proof of concept, quick start, any of that. I think that's important to have.
Well, I think too, though, there's this whole aspect of you just, even if you've implemented 2 or 3 PLM systems, you still, when you're coming back in on it, don't really know what you don't know, right? So at what point do you, use consultants, or do you, say, oh, we can do this on our own? What do you see on our side?
We have a totally unbiased opinion on that.
Well, I know, and I don't, but just it strikes me because there's always this tension between strategic and tactical and making the right plan, and it's expensive to get this wrong. So
right, So I think there's pros and cons to using consultants. I'll start with the cons, so it doesn't sound too self-serving. We don't know your business. Even consultants that maybe spend a lot of time in aerospace and defense. We work with lots of aerospace or medical device, or you name it. We don't know your specific business. We don't know the history about your products, the history about your customers, your go-to-market strategy, what you've tried in the past that worked, what you've tried that didn't work. We don't know that. And so if you want us to come in, we could. You could bring a consultant in and have him educate himself about your business. And there are people that's what they do for a living. But we're going to understand at a higher level the industry, the business. And we're going to understand at a very, very deep level the technology and be able to map that together. We can give you advice. So now moving on to some of the pros, we can give you some advice and or observations that we've seen in the past. So someone comes to us and says, we need smart part numbers. And we say, let me tell you about another customer in this industry that thought that also, and here's what worked for them. So you get that, you're not going to get that advice with just your internal people because they're kind of focused on what they know today. So I think there's certainly a place to bring consultants in, but it's a team effort. It is you bring the company knowledge, and we bring the technical knowledge plus some observations about things we've seen elsewhere, and combined, that can make for a pretty efficient way to get the system up and running.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, having been, fallen for the exciting demo and bought software that didn't work and suffered for 2 years for it, I can say that sometimes consultants are good, and sometimes, they're not. But I think, to your point, it's important that you stay focused on what you're really trying to accomplish, and not the sexy feature that, would you just love to be able to do, but then it creates a lot of other problems. So
that's right. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for this conversation. I think this has been interesting. And it's not like we haven't heard some of these things before, but it's good to hear it together, as we're talking about someone who's in this position, who's looking at a digital engineering project or a PLM MES project. It kind of applies to any kind of project in general in this space. So I'm going to ask Jonathan if he can help us summarize today, if you don't mind.
Yeah, let me see if I could put some of this together. I was furiously taking notes through a lot of this because I think, Derek, a lot of this is stuff that we've talked about in the past, but putting it all together is the part that's interesting. Mm-hmm. So what I caught, and please jump in where I missed something or I get something wrong here, is you can jump in and get quick results. There's probably merit to that, but you can also get down the wrong path. You can do a lot of analysis up front about, what's your problem, how do you solve it, that kind of thing, and that can be useful, particularly if you can't clearly define it up front. But watch out for analysis paralysis. A good way to deal with that is use time boxing. Hey, here's how long we're going to study it before we figure out what the problem is. But a good way to get going is start and adjust, right? So you probably have some prerequisites you need to do. So I don't mean start like the first one we brought up, just go with the software. But once you get started, have your philosophy be that you will start, get something accomplished, and adjust. What goes along with that is having a roadmap, some sort of plan that says, overall, I'm trying to get here. Your analogy about I might need 1 million square foot of building in 10 years. Let me not buy land that's too small for that now. So have something in mind, even though you didn't go get the architect engaged for the 1 million square foot building right at the very beginning. Another one, when we talked about bake-offs, I love your analogy about the, Mack truck versus F-150 kind of, picture there. What are you trying to accomplish? And make sure you're thinking about what the goals are, because you may avoid a lot of the sort of complicated feature function bake-off stuff if you just have in mind what you need to do. And I think another piece of that is, remember, you're trying to accomplish something. You're not buying a truck to buy a truck. You're buying a truck to get the groceries or move across the country, right? So a lot of this stuff needs to start with the capability that you're trying to enhance or develop or have or whatever, because you're in business for some reason that's not buying software. So I think another piece you brought up was the difference between POC, pilot, quick start, and they are all different, right? So you could be doing feasibility with a POC. You could be really checking out a lot of processes with a pilot, or a quick start can match with both of those and be, your implementation philosophy after doing something like that. And that's there are other things that you want to think about to make sure you're on the right path when it is implementation time, like the education alignment piece you mentioned, right? Getting everybody on the same page. Having a business case, no matter how simple or complex it might be, can be part of that alignment. And then we talked a little bit about process, right? So where does process fit in all this? It could fit in a number of stages, but be careful. You want it to match the software or align or something. So don't maybe do them independently. And then the last thing I heard that we talked about was consultants. They can fit, they can give you perspective from the outside. They may not know your business as well as you do, though. So it's, again, the right blend. So what I heard out of all of that is every piece of this could be relevant in how you put together your plan to get started, but it's not that it's one size fits all. And there's certainly ways to get started that are not good if you haven't sort of thought of all the right pieces. What did I miss out of
I think that's right. Yeah. I think your last portion there is the important part. There isn't a one size fits all. There's different approaches. And we have to align the approach with our culture and our company's maturity also. Different companies think differently. I suspect someone like a SpaceX is going to lean more towards the let's just get started and see what happens. But other companies are going to take a little bit more a disciplined approach. And that's fine. Understand what culture our company likes and kind of the maturity of our organization. A startup can do this differently than a company that's got 30 years worth of product out there in the field. And I think when you take all that and line that up with how our company thinks and how we operate, you'll end up with something that fits nicely, and you'll be able to do the proper evaluation.
Right. Another thing I'd add on that is just, I think we missed the adoption piece of it at the end, just making sure you think about how you're going to do that to get that, to build that consensus and success for the long term.
That's a good one not to miss in the plan. You're right.
Well, as we always say, people always seem to be part of the bigger problem. So not that it's a problem, but we got to factor that in. Great. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Jonathan. And thanks, Derek, for your conversation today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Derek.
It was great. And thank you, everyone, for joining in and listening to us today. We appreciate you being here. And we especially appreciate you spending time to stay sharp. So until next time, everybody, we'll see you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being here and listening to this episode of Stay Sharp with Razorleaf. Hey, if you like this podcast, please be sure to hit that like button or leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on where you listen to podcasts, or check us out on YouTube. We've been doing a lot of work on our YouTube page, and we have a lot more shorts up there. So definitely check that out and give us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any comments about who you'd like to see in future episodes or a topic you'd like us to cover, please make a comment somewhere. We'd love to hear from you about that. And then as well, if you have any questions or you want to leave a comment about the episode we just shared, please send us an email to podcast@razorleaf.com. We will be right back with you. Until next time, everybody, stay sharp.